Thank you so much, sir. I now invite our very own Honorable Vice Chancellor, Professor Suhas Pednekar, to share with us his vision and his remarks. Sir, I invite you.
So very good afternoon. Honorable Vice Chancellor Sahni from Goa, Principal of this college, the representatives of the management, and all my dear colleagues. Many of you are the principals of different colleges. There are some from my own family, from the department of various departments of University of Mumbai. Do you know the secret of my being here today? Actually, I have come here not to give a speech, but to listen to Vice Chancellor Sahni. And that is mainly because I know him. I know his contribution in education. I know he is a very good orator. I had an opportunity to listen to him on earlier occasions. But imagine if I'd have told principal of this college that let me come as a participant. The way you laughed, I think she would have done the same. The Vice Chancellor is coming to only attend these. So then I had to tell her, fine, I will come. And then as our old traditions go, which somewhere I think we have to stop, that doesn't mean that since you're Vice Chancellor and if you're going for such occasions to other institutes to listen to somebody, you don't have to be given the time to speak and listen to someone who is rather here with the meaning and the purpose. And that is the reason why I told you to continue, because we don't get such opportunities again and again. Another reason why I probably wouldn't take more time, you know why? Because whatever I wanted to say, he covered everything. There is hardly anything where you need to understand the importance. Only what I can say, the projection he made for 2035 is how and the whole education scenario is expected to be. Do you know what is required in our country today to achieve this? In fact, where is the ma'am? Yeah, sitting there. This session, rather than me standing here and saying something, should have been more of interactive nature. The questions coming from the audience, the participants, and maybe he would answer and I could have participated in that sense. Because I remember I attended two similar programs on academic leadership. One was in Harvard University and another was in Oxford. Just like this, with probably less number. And both the sessions on academic leaderships were for 1 week each. And there's a beautiful way the sessions were handled. And most of the sessions were given some case studies. The case studies given, and then used to be participative interaction, discussion, and coming out with conclusions. Even I remember that there was one session in those in Harvard, and that was on the conflict management, what the academic leaders have to manage the conflicts, and what such a wonderful session. So what I'll do is, I do not know how long you plan to continue. Maybe I'll take a couple of minutes and then let's spend some time with the interaction, because is there? After me. That's good. So that I can reduce my time, No, that's very important. Otherwise, it should not continue the same way as what we have been following, that old traditional maculae methods of teaching, one way, and not giving opportunity to poor students to interact and to even for us to understand where they stand. And that is the reason why I think Vice Chancellor Sahni said very rightly, the time has come for teachers, they need to stop teaching. It's a bold statement, but that's the reality. You should stop teaching in the classroom. And what you need to do is to create the condition for students to learn. And that is very well reflected here. Anyway, going back, if at all to achieve this 2035 vision, you know what is required in a country? Not only in education field, for that matter every field. And the answer is good governance. That is exactly is missing. Good governance, sustainable governance. And where do you think that good governance will come from? And that is the reason why you are here. And the answer is from dynamic leadership. If anyone asks me what is it that is missing to a greater extent today, is this multidimensional leadership, and more in educational sector. Because educational sector, according to me, is the most important, because teaching is the only profession which creates other professions. When you talk about this leadership, today that leadership which is expected is not hierarchical or vertical leadership, but horizontal leadership, shared leadership. The shared leadership leads to shared wisdom. The leadership should be inclusive. The leadership with character for others to, follow you. When you talk about any system, generally 3 questions are asked. Those 3 questions are what, how, and why. Even if you take, say, for example, this college, Guru Nanak College, what many people will ask is what Guru Nanak College does. What is it that is offering? And that is a question asked by many. Very few of us will ask the second question, how? And then you get to know more about it, that you need to understand the education system. And very, very, very few will ask the question, why? And those who ask the questions, why, they are the leaders. They are the potential leaders. And that is where I think the leadership begins. When you start asking question, why? And that is missing to a greater extent. We are used to doing the work, what is so-called allotted to us. We go to the class and teach what is the curriculum, which we always point finger at the university stating that the university has designed it and our job is only to go and cover it, which is again wrong, which is to be uncovered. So once you understand this role, by the way, can I ask questions? And you said that we can question answer can start from now. Yeah. You will have choice to ask questions later, but let me start, Many of you are here with the principals or heads of the department or maybe teacher. What, according to you, is academic leadership? Who you think is an academic leader? Is it only the vice chancellor or principal or the heads of the department to be called as academic leader? That's the first question you need to ask and get the answer. The second question will be, are you ready, whatever level you are today, are you ready to accept bigger challenges in academics? The fact that you are here today, I think you are, and you want to. Am I right? Then the third question is, which is obviously obvious if I mean, you might also laugh if I ask, would you like to be a successful academic leader? Answer is obvious. But if I ask the next question, what do you mean by success in academics? What according to you is the definition of a successful academic leader? And there probably I feel you will not have much clarity at this point of time. And to get that clarity, such type of sessions, interactions is required. Because this technological transformation in education is bringing all such challenges before us, and is very well put before you. And according to me, there are three things which will drive the future of education. One is technology, which is already talked about. The second one is, can anyone tell me? What do you think is the real driver or will drive the future of education? Yes, is innovation. And what is the third one? The third one is going to be equally important, and that will be stakeholders' choice, or it could be called as your consumer habit. Consumer here is nothing but our students. Now, why do I say so? Why the third one is important? And if you do not understand what I think Professor said is very true, will become redundant. And that is a real threat. And that is the reason why we need to revisit ourselves every 6 months. Where do we stand and what is expected of us? When I say that consumer habit or stakeholder choice is that technology is providing so much choices even to the students. And the result is, that is something is, I mean, to be understood in real sense. What I foresee that in future, the cost of education will go down. I'm talking about the tuition fees. Let us not consider our fee structure in the government setup and the government supported institutions. I'm talking about the privatization that has come in education, or even the education that is important in the developed countries. You all are aware of the cost of education. One of the outcome of this technological transformation is that the cost will go down. And that will create a lot of challenges which already started. You know that the enrollment in most of the developed countries like US, UK, Australia is declining. And that is the reason why there are many vice chancellors and their managers coming to India for the students. More than, and we unfortunately at times get trapped thinking that we are signing MOU with them, but most of the time they are not interested in your input in their education. They want students, right? Now, why is it so? And this is mainly because that online education is getting more predominance, getting more importance. when the student has a choice to get the same quality education through online mode than coming to your class, attending for hours and hours and giving exam, and if that degree is not going to have the value in terms of the job employability in the market, he might think twice that should I go to the class, or why can't I opt for online education, and while doing so I can also earn my living. I can take up job somewhere and do the same, and that has already started. Even you may be aware, even the UGC is very soon is coming out with the option for student that is called your credit bank accounts. The student will have choice to complete credits of some courses, not necessarily from the same institute. He can go to the neighboring college, or even he can go to the neighboring university and complete some of the courses, some of the credits, and goes on depositing, and then as per the total requirement to obtain the degree. If this choice is available with student, isn't it he's going to do his homework there where I can get a quality education with minimum cost? Today we all are struggling as principal, as vice chancellors, to maintain that balance between cost of education and quality of education. Now these are the issues we have, and we need to think about it. So what type of academic leadership that is required to sail through? And that is where I feel each one of you as an academic leader sitting here, or maybe a future academic leader wants to take some more or bigger responsibility, to ask 6 questions to yourself. The first question is, where do you stand today? The second question is, how have you reached to where you are today? Do some introspection. The third question will be, where do you want to go from here? What are your objectives? What is it that you want to reach? Where do you want to reach? Third question. Fourth will be, how do you propose to reach there? How do you plan to reach there? And the fifth and sixth are more important for me. The fifth one is, what are the likely obstacles you will face when you want to reach where you want to go? And sixth one is, what according to you is that knowledge and resources you will require to reach your destination? If you do not have the clarity about these 6 questions, then you will be again struggling, and that will be a sort of an ad hoc attempt, as we normally do in our day-to-day academic affairs. So the only thing you have to think that we need to be innovative. Only innovation will find the way out, and that is what our Vice Chancellor said very rightly. You should have that insight. You should have that inclusive approach. And more importantly, I feel leadership is nothing but trust building. You can't achieve everything you working alone, and many times we all know the principals are isolated figures. The day you become principal, everybody distance from you, and somehow knowingly, unknowingly, you also start sitting in the cabin which is closed from all sides, there's no access to other people, and that distances you from other. Only thing that can help you as a leader is communicate, communicate, and communicate. You need to establish that trust with your colleagues and try and work in collaboration. And that is how building relationship is most important, because otherwise, ultimately, I think our job as academic leader is nothing but dealing with people and varieties of people around us. And if you don't do that, that leads to several conflicts, ego hassles. Probably, pardon me if I make a statement and if hurts anyone, but I feel the highest or inflated ego is always amongst teachers, more than any other species on this planet. And these teachers don't realize that the egos you are expected to keep outside the college premises before you enter. And there has to be a distinct line between your personal relationship and the professional commitment. And these are some of those problems. So, I will not take, I think, let us start with some of the questions, but I can only say you have to think differently. Innovation is the only way out in every respect, whether it's a curriculum design, whether it's a teaching learning, whether it's an evaluation, student support system, whatever you want, only innovation. The only way of, I would say, the only way of discovering the limits of the possible is to go beyond them into the impossible. And the time has come where all of us, we cannot rely on that comfortable predictability of yesterday. But we need to understand today's reality and all unknown possibilities of future. Whatever little administrative skills I have, one prayer impacted me immensely, which I would like to share with you, which was written almost 100 years back by one professor in Harvard. It's called Reynold Niebuhr. And the prayer says that, God grant me serenity to accept the things which I cannot change, courage to change the things which I can, and wisdom to know the difference between two. Because many times we try to do something which is beyond our capacity and we waste our energy and time. So that is equally important to understand. So ma'am, I think what I'll do is, it's not right, people are also getting hungry, it's almost past 1. So what we can do is, we'll be very happy to interact with them, we'll like to know from them, and at the end I can only say, the educational institutions are like living organisms. Many of your biologists here will understand. The way that the organism has all sorts of properties, all sorts of parts, but all parts together, they work together. And for the living organism to survive or for its growth, that organism had to adjust with surrounding. And there are many ways. Biologists know that the transport of energy and everything. There are several properties. If you try to compare, our educational institutions are exactly like living organism. So if you do not establish that dynamic equilibrium with the surrounding society in terms of economical, social and environmental perspective, our survival will be at stake. So thank you very much, and let's continue.
Good afternoon, Honorable Vice Chancellor of Goa and our own Vice Chancellor and my dear colleagues. I would like to draw your attention, Dr. Sahni, about left out and left behind and the denied opportunities. And India being a dualistic society, I would like to ask you, the biggest challenge is about inequality in education at all levels, among the teachers, among the students, and public and private sectors. And the policy reforms and the execution of the government towards this has not been much, and given the allocations to the education sector as compared to the other sectors has also been very less. Can you suggest on this? Thank you.
I think that's a very, very good question. I thinking about how I can sort of come up with a succinct answer, but I suppose one way to do this is to probably look at it more generically and suggest the following, that you judge a public policy, any public policy, not by its motives but by its consequences. So you don't start out by worrying about what is it that is driving people to formulate and execute certain policies. You just look at the consequences of those policies. Right? And by that yardstick, we have devised a system of education in which we have deprived the majority of the young learners from quality at the initial stages of education. And by so denying them, we have fundamentally handicapped them for the rest of their lives, the rest of their working lives, but the rest of their lives. Right? Those of us who are in the tertiary sector, all of us in this room, we are getting at what comes at the end of a long process. We all know that there's only that much you can do at the undergraduate level. And I, as a professor of JNU, I mean, all my students are doing masters or doctoral work. You know, I mean, at that stage, frankly, the damage is largely done. So I will just say the following. We need to get serious about the education for all notion. It's happening. Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan. If we look at the data coming from SSA, it's indicating that, in fact, for the first time in our country, there is authentically quality now emerging in very unexpected locales. Look a bit at what's being done in Delhi with the public school system there. There are people now who are moving the children away from convents and, you know, public schools as in the elite schools, and putting them in government schools, in the neighborhood government school, because they actually think that they'll get a better education there. So it's possible to do. I think in our own country, it's possible to do that. One of the things in our document was that we've not talked about examples of other countries. We deliberately didn't get into the Finnish example or this is what, you could get, it's irrelevant. There's only one other country in the world, maybe two, with which our country can reasonably be compared. China and perhaps Brazil. There is no third country in the world. I mean, in terms of the nature of the challenges, etc. So it's interesting to see what's happening in other places, but is that even remotely ultimately relevant to the sort of challenges we face? So the question of left out and left behind is very simple. Until all learners at the early stages of education start on an even footing, you're going to always have a system in which those who have the early advantages will gobble up a huge chunk of the pie at the end. So I don't know whether that answers your question or not, but that's definitely the way I approach the whole issue.
Try to ask him more questions.
Yes. So what would be the role of the private sector in this? Especially in higher education, private sector plays an important role. There are many private players where education is very expensive. So if you're going to make it for all and quality does the private sector have a role? Would that be regulated tremendously, then they won't come into the sector, come into the business?
Well, I mean, as private involvement in education, particularly higher education, moves from the philanthropic mode to the profit-making mode, I think the first issue for public policy is to recognize that there are now players who are in higher education to make money, right? And that therefore it is an industry. And therefore, like every other industry, it needs to be regulated. But what needs to be regulated is what we need to think about. You see, regulation should not be about stifling innovation. In fact, one of the advantages private players have is that they can move quickly, identify new and emerging sectors, start programs. It's much more difficult for public institutions to do so. For a whole range of issues, I could get into the details about why that's the case, but you don't actually see that. You see very few examples in our country of private players in higher education who are authentically doing something different and new. There are some. I wouldn't say there are none. But largely they are mimicking and replicating what's being done in the public institutions, right? The regulatory aspect has to be about predatory, pricing of the product. Because the reality is that, if you have a system in a continent-sized country of 66,000 medical seats, obviously you can imagine what each seat is going to cost. And you can ask some very searching questions. People like yourself need to ask these questions. Who says that undergraduate medical education requires a 200-bed multi-specialty hospital? In which other country today do you have that requirement? The answer is none. Okay, so and who's made that decision? It's a decision ultimately being made by the regulators themselves. So you basically outprice medical education in this country. Only the children of medical practitioners actually, is there any economic rationality today in our country for wanting to become a physician or surgeon yourself? Is if you know that with that degree you're entering in an ongoing practice and that you'll be now adding more hands on deck. And so it's only medical families. You can either choose to continue to be a urologist like your dad or decide to specialize and become something else. So that's the basic choice. Now, how on earth will that ever serve the public health needs of this continent-sized country of ours? So we've got to start off by asking those questions, and I could give you other examples. I could give you examples of how the IITs have, through the joint JEE, distorted the entire education system of this country. Do you know that the private tuition industry in our country today, in terms of annual turnover, is marginally larger, not by much, but marginally larger than all the public monies being put by the union and the states in all levels of education? Now, if this is not a case of the tail wagging the dog, I don't know what is. And why do you have this huge tuition industry? Because there are so few seats. And the competition is brutal to get into those seats. And a bright kid just doing the class 12 syllabus will not get in because they're being examined for stuff which is BSc 2.5. So they've got to do the additional work. Now, if this is not a distortion of the system, what is? So I'm sorry. I think we need to ask some of the searching questions, and at least in some cases, we will find, if we are honest about asking these questions, that the fault lies at the level of the public sector, at the level of the regulators, at the level of public institutions. So, it's easy for us to vilify the private sector. I'm not making a case at all for not regulating the private sector. Please don't misunderstand me. But I think we need to sort of fundamentally get beyond this public-private dichotomy. This is an area on which you're a specialist, so you should say something.
No, I think what you said is right. First of all, that philanthropy is going down. And there is always give and take. The private players will come into and will help you only if they are benefited. And that is, and in fact, we are equally responsible why this is not happening, because ultimately it depends on the trust building and the mutual benefits. For example, even in research, why we are lacking in research in India is because we are not producing that quality research. Not that we don't have brains, but we do not have that support, those who want to do quality research. Because even the industries, for example, they don't believe you, because one of the important aspects which we many times forget is the time-bound projects need to be done and we are expected to give the results. That doesn't happen many times. So ultimately the trust building and mutual benefits, if that is possible, I think you can continue getting some support even from the private players in future.
I think even after 50 years, it is not reached up to 4% also. So when the government or the policy makers, they treat it as non-productive higher education, how this mass education is possible, sir? I think it is not even 4% after 50 years.
I mean, I don't think there's anybody in education who won't argue for us to get more resources. I mean, I think that's true. I was told by a fellow vice chancellor in Madhya Pradesh, I'll be identifying her if I identify the gender. So, and I've already identified her by using the term her. But anyway, I said something very interesting in the last one of the vice chancellor conferences, just a casual interaction. She was, her budget just to run the university is about 40 crores per annum. She gets 4 crores from the state government. Now, how can you run any institution if you're getting only 10% of the money required to run it? So let's not kid ourselves. When we talk about school, colleges and universities as currently constituted being redundant by 2035, we are not talking about some nonsensical thing. It's actually true. A lot of our institutions today are already just shells. In fact, the teaching learning stuff is not happening there. The only way you can run a university like that is by having departments with 1 or 2 faculty members per department. Geography, 2 faculty members, commerce, 2 faculty members, physics, 2 faculty members. And you're trying to run entire academic programs based on that. So the point is not about what the Kothari Commission recommended. Nothing is permanent in stone. Let's accept that the economics of public finance in our country today, over a quarter of all of our public money is just going to service our public debt. That's the reality. I mean, you look at the latest data, I think it's about 27% of our public spending is just going in servicing the debt we have. It's way more than any other component. It's way more than national defense also. It's way more than infrastructure. So I'm not disagreeing with you on the need to have more resources. But the reality is in recent times, a lot of the money that has gone into education has gone into pay and pensions. We are the beneficiaries of it. From the 5th Pay Commission onwards, as academic salaries started getting respectable in our country, and they should be, I'm not saying it shouldn't be, but a significant chunk of what we spend on education now goes into salaries and pensions. That's true about our military, by the way, as well. I'm saying this as a professor of international politics. So the question you're asking is an important one. But the challenge would be to say that if you were to sort of increase that spending, would that just mean more going into pay and pension, or would it be going into other activities? So it's not just the question, therefore, I'm asking the quantum of money going into education. It's also what the utilization is there of that money. So again, it may seem on the face of it that I'm disagreeing with you. I'm not disagreeing with you. But I'm just saying when you look at it a bit closely, there are other sorts of issues that do emerge. So, I mean, I take a lot of solace from something like the success of the Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan. And I think that something like RUSA potentially has the same transformatory impact, which is targeted central funding to state universities. And that, those of us who make ourselves worthy of that funding, we'll probably be able to do wonderful things with that additional money coming. It'll liberate the state government from certain funding, and so on and so forth. So, I mean, I actually think that we should, a lot of us who are in the education business here, all of us should look more seriously at Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan. You look at SSA, you look at some of the changes taking place at the level of our schools, and you do see the green shoots. Some really new, interesting things are happening on the ground. One other final point, because linked to Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan, which I think is a challenge for all of us collectively, is this. Are we at the tertiary level ready for those students who are going to be hitting us in 10 years' time? When the massive expanded numbers, and if the quality has gone on, are we going to be ready in terms of the number of places, the placement? Are we going to still have these absurd rules of how many to a classroom, how many divisions, etc., workload calculations, things like that we are doing? Or are we going to again be unprepared when suddenly that tsunami comes and hits us? When suddenly there's a tripling in the size of the qualified candidates. In fact, they'll be in quality, they'll be better than previous candidates. So I mean, I don't see any signs that we in the tertiary sector we have this decade when we can actually begin to do things to make sure we are there. When that happens, we can receive them and give them the education they deserve. Or rather, as Vice Chancellor would put it, create the conditions so they can get the education that they want.
And as normally it is, every session is wind up saying that you can discuss over lunch, right?
Never happens that way.
Sir, I would like to ask the role of teacher more so in the higher education is transforming in a big way, rather already transformed from a unidimensional role of transmission of knowledge to multidimensional pathfinder, counselor, coach, friend, philosopher and all that. This is the requirement. Then on the other hand, we have a situation where we need top class teachers to cope up with this challenge, and the real situation is that instead of having permanent teachers, as it was pointed out in the presentation, we have the problem of contractual teachers. Naturally, the question is how to make teaching as a preferred profession than going for teaching as a compulsion. Has this issue been tackled in this Mission 2035, sir? Or any thoughts on this? Thank you.
My sense is that being a teacher, at least at the tertiary level, is a very attractive profession today. And I don't think that there's much evidence to substantiate that it is a second or a third choice for many people who are in education. I think that may have been the situation at one stage. But today there are definitely indications that there are people who are sort of getting into education now, very clear that they want to be in education. It's happening at the school level also now. I think the challenges are somewhat different from. Let me reframe your question a bit differently, and that I think is a challenge, which is how to start off with, how do we salvage the BSc degree? I put it quite bluntly. How do we salvage the BSc degree? How do we get students interested in science again, rather than sort of focusing on engineering and medicine? And if we can do that, if we can somehow make science attractive again, and by the way, there's few more rewarding and remunerative careers in the world today than science. To be a good scientist is to really have a satisfying job where you're passionate about what you do and you get paid very well for it. So that's the challenge. If we can get some of our best students into science rather than into medicine and engineering, I think we would have done the first step. Then it can go to the other streams as well. And I think if we seriously get into the BVOC business and we start taking Bachelor of Vocational Studies seriously, and every college, every university has a few really outstanding BVOC programs, we'll then have students going into the arts, commerces and science streams only out of a passion for it and not because there are no other options available. And I think that then will translate to the next step, which is some percentage of them will end up as teachers and at the tertiary level. But I think that's the challenge. And I really use the word salvage with thought. I think we need to restore the BSc degree to the prestige it once had. It was once a very prestigious degree to be a Bachelor of Science. And to the extent that that's got devalued, so has the Bachelor of Commerce, so has the Bachelor of Arts, so has the Bachelor of Social Work, and a lot of other degrees as well. So we can get the BSc back to the pedestal, and get some students who could do medicine or engineering back into science. I think that's the first step. That's the way I look at it. I don't know whether this is the sort of answer you were seeking, but...
No, I'll just comment, and there's the last one, right?
No,
Yeah.
sure.
See, the time has come where we have to stop depending on government, thinking that the government will find solutions to our problem and government will give the support. Government is also making very clear where in every way and every day we need to be independent. Whatever the salary or rather the component which we get from the government, that goes only on salary. So even the previous question I think is very clear. We have to find our own way. And there again, innovation is the only way. We have to think differently as how this could be done. The only one thing where government can or should do, and that even I think the professor said it in his presentation, and that to conduct very good training sessions for teachers, which is highly essential. Because probably teaching is the only profession where once you are selected, the next day you are expected to go to the class and start lecturing. It doesn't happen in any other profession. Teaching is an art. You may be knowledgeable, does not mean you can be a good teacher. So that is the training, initial training which is missing. And it should not be just one initial training. All teachers should also understand that your learning should become the continuous process in different way. You must go and see other institutions. You must establish the collaborations. And there, not that the principal should have to say that, okay, you go out and attend this, the conference or whatever. I feel, again, pardon me if I say so, but I think UGC come out with that, UGC came out with a decision which is not working very well today, is that accumulating API. Probably the intention was good, but it is not taken in the right spirit by many teachers today. Our ultimate objective is to satisfy the students sitting in your class, and not only to improve your own, to increase the API, and that is misunderstood. And that is required, okay? And as it said, in one of the, I don't remember the speech, I said that if the teachers don't realize this scenario, the changing scenario, after some or few years the students will curse you, okay? When they go out and realize what they did in last 3, 4, 5 years, today they do not know, the poor students do not know what is stored for them in the outside world. But when they will face that, and if they do not get in the classroom, they will curse you. And next step will be, you will become redundant then, when they will have a lot of other choices. So this is wonderful, this is a very alarming situation for all of us, not just teacher, but even as administrators. Okay, thank you.
Just a brief vote of thanks. I extend heartfelt thanks to our towering personalities, Professor Varun, Sahni and Professor Suhas Pednekar, for truly expanding our horizons in higher education. I thank the management for their support in conducting this conclave. My sincere thanks to all the invitees, principals, vice principals, registrars and other dignitaries from the various colleges and research institutions who have graced this event with their august presence. Thanks to all my colleagues, technical staff and volunteers for their wholehearted support in all the activities related to this conference. Finally, I thank our principal, Dr. Pushpinder Bhatia, who has envisaged this conclave and motivated and encouraged each and every one of us to be a part of this venture. Thank you.